Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast. My name's Imy Nixon. This is episode 190, and today is a very special emergency podcast covering the Damian Lillard trade. Three-team deal sending Damian Lillard to the Bucks. We're going to get into who we think won the trade, what we think the fallout will be for each team, the storylines that come from it. And to close the show, we're going to talk a little bit of baseball. We're going to rank our top 5 most complete rosters in the MLB heading into the postseason. But before we get into it, make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, share it with your friends. Just a reminder also, we're available on all podcast platforms as well. So if you're not able to get to YouTube sometimes, you can go listen to it over there. You can go follow us over on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And yeah, let's get into it. Joining me from Houston, Texas, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael. How you doing, man?
Doing great. Just overloaded with joy with all the sports that we have going on, everything that we have to talk about, how our podcasts have been going lately. My Deep in the Heart of Longhorn show that I think is doing really well. I got some live viewers last night. Just everything that's happening in the sports world, including myself, my grandfather, and my dad going to the Houston Texans game this weekend against the Pittsburgh Steelers, where it'll be a nice family reunion for the Watt family, as J.J. Watt will be inducted into their Ring of Honor, and T.J. Watt will get to celebrate with his brother. JJ will get to celebrate his brother as he's off to a fantastic start to the season. It's just going to be a really fun weekend. We've got a good college football slate, but forget any of that today. I mean, today I'm going about my business after my lunch break at work, just getting ready to, get started with my afternoon schedule. I look at my phone one last time before I get ready to put it away so that I can get down to business. And boom, there's the ESPN notification. Damian Lillard traded to the Bucks. And then I go to Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it these days. I see Bleacher Report. I see Woj's tweet. And I'm like, oh my God. So then I start blowing up your phone. I have some other friends I started to text. And I got kind of carried away reading about the trade, reading the reaction on Twitter. And then my manager got on the phone for a sales call, and they started chirping away about the trade. So I was listening to them. And I didn't even get started with my afternoon work until like an hour later than I wanted to. So that led me to leave work a little late. Then I got on the phone with my parents. I had to get my dinner. It just all got away from me. I didn't get the prep that I wanted done, but I know enough about basketball. I know enough about baseball that we're going to still do this for you guys. Because after tonight, it's going to be difficult to record podcasts, for at least from my end. So let's jump right into the trade, man. We have no time to waste. Thank you to whoever might be watching live throughout the course of this episode. If you are watching live, give us your thoughts. Who won this trade? What do you think about this deal? And also, who are your top 5 most complete rosters in baseball going into the postseason?
Yeah. Let's get into this thing. So the trade in its entirety. The Milwaukee Bucks receive Damian Lillard. The Suns get Jusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, Nassir Little, and Keon Johnson. The Trailblazers get a huge haul, including Jrue Holiday, Deandre Ayton, Toumani Camara, 2029 unprotected first round pick, and 2 pick swaps in 2028 and 2030. I'll start with you. This trade, as you said, it was shocking. But let's start with the Bucks side of things. What did you think about this trade for the Bucks?
Well, first of all, did you see the tweet from, I guess it's a year and a half ago, May 15th, 2022? And this is pretty amazing how this stuff works out sometimes. At Mr. Lloyd on Twitter says, at Dame Lillard, if you ever want to pick a player that would help you get into the playoffs, finals maybe, in parentheses, who would you pick? Only in present day. And guess what his response was? Giannis. And here we are.
Not a bad pick.
Not a bad pick at all. And here we are. Look, this obviously, as Vegas has already made them, at least co-championship favorites in my eyes. I think Lillard completes the puzzle. In Portland for so many years, the one thing I think that's been primarily missing as an ingredient that Portland failed to give Lillard, which didn't allow him to fully compete for championships and conference finals appearances as much as a great player like him should be able to, was even above average defensive front court. They've never had that in Portland. Now he has that. And so with Giannis, with Brook Lopez, with Bobby Portis, they have size. And now Lillard, especially in pick and roll, won't be asked to do some of the things that he was asked to do in Portland. He won't be asked to get over the screen, stay, in front of the ball handler, block shots, do all that stuff that he's just not all that great at. Like, that's not who he is. He's not a great defender. He's just not. He's disengaged at best. Now, all you really have to do if you're Dame defensively is drive the ball handler, force him into the paint where you have arguably the best defensive front court in basketball in Giannis and Brook Lopez and all the big bodies that the Bucks have. You sacrifice Jrue Holiday, who's a great player. What is he, an 8 or 9-time All-Star? He made all defensive team all 3 years he was in Milwaukee, had a very good run there. We'll talk about Portland's side of it and Jrue's side of it in particular in a little bit. But I think for the Bucks, this obviously elevates them to the level of championship or bust, in my opinion. Now they have a guy who's one of the best flat-out scorers in the league, who's a closer in late-game situations, who can alleviate the duties of, say, one Chris Middleton. I think the one big criticism people have of the Bucks the last couple playoff runs is that when the offenses slow down, when the game slows down, their half-court offense could get a little stagnant at times, and they needed that go-to guy. I mean, we saw it last year. Giannis was kind of hesitant at times to take over late in games. Now they have Damian Lillard, arguably next to Steph Curry, the best knockdown shooter, 30-plus feet out from the basket. They have a guy who can get to the rim, get to the cup, score at will, find his own shot, alleviate some of the duties of, say, one Chris Middleton. They have an elite guy. And now you have Giannis and Dame in a pick-and-roll duo. You still have Brook Lopez. You have a complete roster now, and it's championship or bust for Milwaukee. I won't finish all my thoughts right now. I want to give it back to you. We can have sort of a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go on the record and just say I don't think we've ever seen we haven't seen it on the court just yet, but in theory, a pick and roll combination with this level of pull-up shooting range, rim pressure at the same time. Giannis hasn't historically been a great player in rolling situations, but he's never had a pick and roll partner at this caliber. It's just flat out plain and simple. And you pair a group of that pick and roll with decent spacing with a center who can space the floor in the corners and solid shooters in Pat Connaughton and Chris Middleton. I mean, it's scary. It's like terrifying if you're anyone in the Eastern Conference or really just anyone in the NBA in general. And then you look at what it means defensively. The Bucks have been able to defend at an elite level year after year after year. That's how they've remained a elite team in the regular season and the playoffs year after year. So that still won't change. They're still going to be able to basically guard the pick and roll 3-on-2 with how good Giannis is in terms of splitting the low player in the corner and helping to the roll man. He can do both because he's so athletic and lanky. And the advantage that gives you with Dame, who's not a adequate point of attack defender, certainly not the defender that Jrue Holiday was either. It's a perfect fit. It's a fit made in heaven. I mean, this is a type of thing that you would put together on a 2K My League or something like that. It's just, you can't formulate it any better. And I got to give a shout out to the Bucks just because it's an example of a organization who's in a small market and is able to keep their superstar player happy. They're able to go out and make the moves, see the weaknesses they have, and go out and address them. Round of applause, man. Can't do it any better.
Absolutely. If you care for more traditional stats, Lillard averaged a career high 32 points per game this past year, or last year, I guess it is, now that we are on the precipice of starting a new NBA season, or at least starting training camps.
Yep.
That's the most for any player in league history who moved on to a new team the following season. So that's via the ringer. And look, you put it perfectly. He's the puzzle piece. He's the perfect puzzle piece to finish the Milwaukee Bucks championship puzzle, to get them back to being in the finals, hopefully. I mean, to me, this is now championship or bust. I'll get to that in a little bit. Damian Lillard is a career 37% three-point shooter on high difficult volume. He's an elite pick and roll creator who I think will form an immediate thunder and lightning duo with Giannis, as we all know. I mean, those two players are just too great to not have immediate success on that end of the floor. And he's one of the NBA's best clutch performers over the past decade, period. Dame Time is a nickname and a solution for the Bucks, arguably their greatest weakness over the past couple of years, which, as I mentioned, is so often, especially in last year's playoffs, they fumbled late game possessions after late game possession after late game possession in the playoffs. And Dame will absolutely help with that. So he's going to elevate them offensively, especially in the playoffs. And the other side of that equation is it's a good for Dame in that the last 4 seasons in Portland ranked 27th or worse in defensive rating per cleaning the glass. In each of his last 4 seasons in Portland, they were not good at all defensively. they were asking a 6'2" guard to just focus too much of his energy on that end of the floor in an area where is not his strong suit. And now you pair him with a strong defensive backcourt. Jason Timpf made a very good point on Hoops Tonight in his reaction episode. Look at basically all the teams that have been winning championships the past decade. They've all had relatively strong, really good defensive front courts. I mean, you think about Draymond and Andre Iguodala. You think about Kawhi and Marc Gasol with Toumani. You think about all those Golden State teams with Draymond and Andrew Wiggins, and you can go back and back. You can go to the Duncan, David Robinson days. You can go to pick almost any championship team that you want. They've all had at least above average defensive front courts. I think it was a really good point by Jason Timpf of Hoops Tonight. And now you're getting the elite closer, the last piece of the puzzle, so to speak, hopefully for the Bucks to go championship or bust. My one question to you before I want to make a couple more points about the championship or bust conversation is, do you think Milwaukee ultimately makes this move if Giannis ultimately doesn't start to make some of the comments that he's made recently to the New York Times and to other media outlets about potentially at least flirting with the idea of leaving Milwaukee if, say, things didn't work out this upcoming season?
It's hard to say. I mean, looking at this deal from a Milwaukee standpoint, you're essentially trading Jrue Holiday and Grayson Allen and picks that are far past your window of contention anyway to just go all in and go after this thing, get another championship and potentially multiple championships. I mean, it's a no-brainer if you're the Bucks. So if this trade was put on the table, I think they take it regardless, especially given how last season ended for them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that answer. I think you put it perfectly. It's not surprising at all to see the Bucks pivot so drastically, so fast after the first round flameout last year. It's not a huge surprise to see them go out and get Lillard's half-court shot creation, his clutch scoring, can help reduce their reliance on one Chris Middleton, whose health and effectiveness at some points in times with injuries now being a big question as he's, getting older as a player. All the things that Dame will provide, the intangible things, the on-the-court things, as one of the best NBA players that we've ever seen, with Giannis and Brook Lopez to compensate for any defensive deficiencies that they'll now have in their backcourt, getting rid of Jrue Holiday. It's a no-brainer. And this is what well-run, small market or big market, this is what well-run organizations in sports do. They're aggressive, but they're calculated, and they make the right moves at the right times. And typically, more times than not, those moves pay off in championships or multiple championships, a championship or multiple championships. Teams that are aggressive eventually, in most cases, not all cases, get rewarded for it. And if you're Milwaukee, there could be many, 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 many good benefits to this. You could win not only one, but maybe two championships. I think Dame's got multiple good years left, as long as he can stay healthy. I think obviously Giannis is just like in the early prime stages of his career. And so you've got a good runway here, I think, to contend. And if you keep this core together, which well-run organizations typically do, there's no reason that this shouldn't be a team that is in the conference finals. Now, there's teams out there that I don't think are afraid of the Milwaukee Bucks. Like, I don't think Boston's going to be scared of them. I don't know what's going to happen in Philadelphia. I don't think Denver's going to be scared of Milwaukee if they match up in the finals. But like they are now, in my mind, the co-favorites with the Denver Nuggets at the very least to go win the championship. With the combination of the superstar point guard that can do pretty much everything, complemented by the first or second best player in the world. I mean, Giannis and Jokic are sort of vying for that spot. You can pick either one. If you want to say Jokic right now, coming off the championship and what he did, I wouldn't really argue with you. If you want to say Giannis, that's completely fine as well. Like, this is the perfect match made in heaven. That's really all it comes down to for me. So
Yeah.
There are some things, I mean, and I'll finish with this, and then we can get to some of the other teams. The Bucks didn't control any of their next 4 first-round picks anyway, and they still owe New Orleans 2 swaps and 2 outright picks from the previous Holiday trade. Now they're out 3 more first-round picks, I believe, from this trade, meaning they can't use a future first-round pick to upgrade this roster for at least the next 2 years under the new CBA, at that point, their next available pick to be able to deal would be the 2032 first-round pick, and that won't even be available to deal until 2 years from now. And if you look at Dame's contract, he's 33 years old. He's owed a $122 million contract extension over 2 years that doesn't even kick in for another 2 years. So if for whatever reason the Bucks don't parlay this boost that they got today into another finals berth or another championship, I don't think it's going to happen. I think Giannis is staying now. But is there a chance that Giannis could potentially still leave at that point when his time is eventually up in Milwaukee, and they'll just be left with a $63 million bill for a 36-year-old Damian Lillard several years down the road? I don't think that's likely. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not counting on that to happen, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind. We've seen teams like this not work out before, but I think this one is just too good to be true. I think this one will work out. Now let's talk about the Blazers. Do you have anything else to add on the Bucks?
I'm just gonna say the one red flag you could possibly have is health.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna go any further on that because that's an obvious one.
Yeah.
When you're bringing a 33-year-old player in on top of the history Chris Middleton has had. So let's move on.
Okay, I think what we'll do, let's address the Blazers' return. Then we'll address the Jrue Holiday aspect of this. And then we'll do the Suns, and then we'll go to baseball.
All right, sounds good. I think for the Blazers, they had to balance the whole dilemma of sending Dame to a situation where he can win, doing right by him, and also getting enough in return to make it all worth it. And I think they did a decent job of it. I think, depending on how you feel about Deandre Ayton, I mean, you could nitpick there, but you're pairing, your electric backcourt in Anthony Simons and
Scoot.
what's his name? Scoot Henderson. And I mean, you're giving them a good pick and roll partner for the foreseeable future. So I don't see it. I don't really see any negative in that. I mean, he's a solid defensive fulcrum. I mean, you can, ask questions about how effective he will be in a playoff setting, but I don't think the Blazers have that as a priority right now anyway. Right now, it's all about the development of those two guards and along with Shaedon Sharpe. And bringing in DeAndre Ayton, I think, will help with that. Um, and then Jrue Holiday. Actually, no, I'll hear what you have to say first before we get into Jrue Holiday.
Yeah, I mean, just to build off what you said, in DeAndre Ayton, which I think is a good piece to get back. You can nitpick things about his game. You can nitpick the work ethic, the want to be great, all that intangible stuff that the media will talk about. You can nitpick certain parts of his game, absolutely. But at the very least, when he's fully engaged, he is a very good pick and roll guy for this young backcourt who has really good hands and will finish around the rim. At the very least, he's that, and he's a solid defensive fulcrum. He's a big body, solid defensive fulcrum that you can have as a solid paint defender. I mean, he's fine, right? He's serviceable, totally serviceable. He's still young. And I don't know what his contract situation is, but I don't think Portland cares anyway. So at the very least, you're getting that. And then you get Jrue Holiday, who they're likely going to deal, right? They're going to look to get more assets out of Jrue Holiday. But I mean, it's a nice return. I mean, it's nothing special. They get some picks. Who else did they get? They got I don't have the trade right in front of me. Did they get any other young assets that are important to mention here? Yeah. So, I mean, you look at that, it's a nice return. I think Ayton's the main piece. They're going to deal Holiday. The picks are nice, but they're not until later on. So we'll see where that goes. It's hard to say what those turn into. But if you look at this Blazers team now, I mean, I think they were successful in moving off the Nurkic contract, which they wanted to. I think that was a goal of this Dame trade, is that they wanted to unload Nurkic, and they were successful in doing so. They get, I would say, a better player in DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah, I definitely.
And absolutely. They get Holiday, who they can probably flip for at least more assets, whoever those might be. And, they get some picks, which are nice to have in the stash. So I think they're going to do a pretty good job of building around this young backcourt, which I really, really like. The more that I look about it, I mean, everyone has their different opinions on Scoot, but everyone seems to think that he's a generational type guy, or could be, with his size and his skill set. I love Shaedon Sharpe, have ever since he came out of college. And then Anthony Simons with the microwave type scoring ability that he has. I mean, there are some good things going here for Portland that I like. And then you build around that fulcrum, which is DeAndre Ayton, in your front court. So I don't really know too much about Toumani Camara, but
yeah, I don't really either. We'll see what happens with him. Sometimes, you get a Marcus Hall situation, which would be extremely rare, but you never know.
Yeah,
what can happen with like a throw-in player.
Absolutely. So if Portland does end up trading Jrue Holiday, in your mind, what are the ideal landing spots? I mean, we know there are going to be many, many, so to speak, contenders that will be on the phone with Portland. But are there any destinations that stick out in your mind that you would like to see, I guess, come to fruition for Jrue Holiday in a trade?
The first team that popped into my head was the Los Angeles Clippers. And I don't know how much it really makes sense in terms of, you already have Russell Westbrook there, but the idea of them getting James Harden, which was talked about at certain points in the summer, I think Jrue Holiday would be a better fit than what James Harden would be. So if I'm the Clippers and I want a ball handler, another ball handler, why not go grab Jrue Holiday, who, I mean, you don't have a lot of picks to work with as the Clippers, but that was the first team that popped in my head. I don't know. It really depends on the demands that Jrue wants to make, because if he wants to go to a contender, then the options become a little bit more limited. But if he's open to going to a young team like the Magic, for example, and working with that young core, then that opens up the door for Portland to get more in return.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Jrue Holiday with the Clippers. I mean, it's not the perfect match made in heaven, but
Yeah.
you can kind of see where he could potentially slot in. I mean, the Clippers supposedly ended their conversations with uh, the Sixers. You know, those conversations that were taking place supposedly with, as it pertains to James Harden. I mean, I think he would slot in fairly nicely alongside Kawhi and Paul George. The problem then becomes is health is a big issue there. Obviously, we know load management has been an issue for years now. But I think the Clippers have obviously been looking for an answer at that starting point guard spot, to which I don't think Russell Westbrook is the answer there. But I mean, if you think about it, they could. Holiday is a guy that shot 38% from 3-point range last year. That's an area where obviously Russell Westbrook has mightily struggled over the course of his career, which limits LA's ability to really space the floor. If I can envision a scenario where Holiday's the starter, Westbrook comes off the bench, where he has full reign on attacking the basket against weaker opponents. I think it'd give the Clippers some better depth just slotting in Holiday at that point guard spot. And he's an experienced guard, has championship experience. He can facilitate an offense, create for himself efficiently. I don't totally hate the Clippers possibility. I mean, there are other contenders that I think will be out there potentially looking to make an addition. I think about the Raptors, who were a team that I think was reportedly in on
Yeah, they were
the
in on
Damian
Dame.
Lillard
Yeah.
sweepstakes. Who knows? Maybe the Sixers get involved. They're still trying to figure out what they're going to do with Harden, but maybe the Sixers get involved. They'll at least make a call, I think. And then what do the Heat do now? That's another conversation that I forget that we still need to have. Um,
Yeah.
if you're the Heat, where do you go now? Now that the Bucks in the Eastern Conference got the guy that you wanted, and you wanted bad, I think. So, what is the next move, I guess, for Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra and co?
And the most hard part about it, as a Heat fan, is you just have no clue. I mean, if anyone's gonna pull something off, it's Pat Riley. I think he's gonna figure out a way to make a splash move, to um, maybe get a score that isn't fitting with their current team. Maybe CJ McCollum could be available. I don't know. There's not a whole ton you can really do right now if you're the Heat. You don't have a ton of assets. To get something good, you got to give something good.
Yeah,
So you're kind of just left in a bind here.
yeah, kind of stinks. We can do a deeper dive on that aspect of it maybe a little later, or if something happens over the next week, we'll talk about that. Obviously, yeah, I don't know. I don't know really where you go if you're the Heat. You're obviously going to have to give up something of value to get back something of value. And I don't know what, like, I honestly can't tell you what that is right now.
Yeah, I don't know what player they'd be willing to part ways with right now.
Right. So I don't know if they knew that Milwaukee was going to pull the trigger on this. maybe do they go a little further in whatever their offer was? If they had, I mean, I'm assuming they had at least one or two offers on the table for Damian Lillard, as he's a guy they really coveted. Uh, it's really hard to know what other organizations are doing, but all of a sudden you have Milwaukee, and then you have Boston, you still have Philadelphia, you have some other teams in the East. I never will be the one to doubt. I mean, Miami, they're still going to be pests. They're still going to be a good team. They're still going to be competing, I think, at a high level in the playoffs. But the East just got stronger, and you're kind of left in a situation where you're just stuck with what you have. And
Yeah, they got weaker. There's no
yeah,
question about it.
yeah. So I don't know.
The other team that popped in my head for Jrue Holiday before we move on is the Knicks or the Nets. The Nets in particular have a lot of wings that they could, move around. They have a surplus at that position. Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson. I don't know which one of those they'd be willing to move, but one of those guys, if the Blazers, for some reason, like want to bring one of those guys in and value them highly, then I think Jrue Holiday would go fit great there. And then the Knicks, I don't know. I think the idea of pairing Jrue Holiday with Jalen Brunson would just be fantastic in my eyes. But I just don't know what package you make.
Yeah, yeah. Those are interesting thoughts you bring up. Let's quickly address Phoenix's side of things. From a Phoenix standpoint, can you pull the trade back up? They get Nurkic, they get a couple solid middling contracts and
Yeah,
Grayson
role
Allen and
players.
Nassir Little. And then they also get a young player in Keon Johnson. Um, look, I mean, I think Jason mentioned that Grayson Allen's a guy who plays hard. He was, I think, the second most efficient spot up shooter on 3-pointers last year.
Yeah,
Nassir Little is a guy that I've really liked ever since he came out of North Carolina. Was drafted, I think, a couple years ago. We'll see where that goes, but Phoenix has been a team that now with Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker has just been looking for solid depth. That's been an issue, at least the past couple of years, last year in particular. You get Grayson Allen, you get Nassir Little. I think Allen's a good depth bench piece who can shoot the ball, will play hard. Um, Nick Wright of Fox Sports 1, which I think is pretty funny, calls him the Mac Jones of the NBA. I think that's pretty funny. I don't know what that necessarily means, but
I don't know.
I think it's funny. And then Nurkic is
Yeah.
obviously a downgrade from what you had in Deandre. And I think the Suns are probably a worse basketball team today than they were yesterday. But I mean, you get a guy, a big body in the middle who can bang with the other bigs out west. I mean, I don't.
I just think of that Charles Barkley
Yeah,
clip. When a guy is banging you, you got to spin off.
yeah. I don't know.
Sorry.
I don't really know what to think from Phoenix's side. I mean, I guess you get a couple nice middling contracts you could maybe use in another trade. Um, you have some nice depth now. I like some of the other moves they made in free agency, but I do think going from Ayton to Nurkic is a significant downgrade. And I mean, they're just going to have to be a team, in my opinion, that outscores everybody with Durant, Booker, and Beal, and they could totally do that. So I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think the Suns are done yet in terms of moves. I think I would compare this move a lot to what the Mavericks did with Porzingis, offloading him for Dinwiddie and for Bertans, splitting one big contract into two smaller contracts. But the Suns did it in an even more extent with this move, splitting it into four different movable contracts. I think they're gonna be making moves here. They're not gonna let this current roster sit as it is. I don't think,
Yeah.
unless they really like what Jacques Landale has to offer as a starting center. Um, I just don't see them staying pat right now.
Yeah, I don't think it makes sense to stand pat with what they
Yeah,
have. They've got some things that they need to work out, but I think you're right. They're not done. They shouldn't be done. And they are another team that I think is another organization that, at least as of recently, is fairly well run and aggressive as a front office. So I think they'll make the necessary moves that they need to. The Western Conference obviously it's a beast. So
yeah,
we'll address a lot of these other stuff before the season begins or as we get into the season. But yeah, I mean, I think overall, I think in the immediate, the Bucks win this trade.
yeah,
They're getting the guy, the final piece to the puzzle, in my opinion. That, as we addressed at the beginning of the episode, fits perfectly with that Bucks roster. I think the Blazers get a nice piece in DeAndre Ayton. Think what you want of him as a player, but at the very least, he's a solid defensive fulcrum and a good pick and roll player who has good hands and finishes around the basket. They're probably going to flip Jrue Holiday for more assets, and they get some future picks, which are nice to have in the stash. And then for the Suns, you downgrade for right now, but you get some nice middling contracts, good pieces that you could potentially flip for better players, and you have Nurkic now, which I don't really know what to think of, but maybe you flip him too. So
yeah, yeah. We'll see. Let's get into this baseball conversation. I think right now there's a lot of questions to be answered in the NBA, so it's hard to project. Like it was a super raw reaction to that trade, but we'll definitely
I
be
have
readdressing stuff here moving
absolutely.
forward.
We'll be going deeper into that trade, into the offseason and everything else as we get closer to the NBA season. Couple shout outs I want to make before we get into this baseball segment. Number one, tonight, the Braves clinched home field advantage throughout the playoffs, but they also, Ronald Acuna Jr., stole his 70th base tonight. He stole his 70th base tonight. He lifted the base out of the ground and thrust it into the air. A 40-40 season in baseball, meaning 40 home runs and 40 stolen bases, is incredible. Like, that puts you in the elite of the elite company in baseball history. A 40-70 season is inconceivable. Forget the new rules, forget the bigger bases. That's just ridiculous. He's going to win NL MVP. Outside of Ohtani and maybe Judge when he's healthy, he's the best player in baseball. I don't care what anyone says. And no one's ever done that. He's the only guy who's ever hit 40 or more home runs and stole 70 bases in a season. All the great baseball players over the course of 150 years, he's the only guy who's ever done that. And then also, shout out to Garrett Cole, who finished his 2023 season tonight with a complete game shutout, his second of the year, in Toronto against the Toronto Blue Jays team that has everything to play for, and a New York Yankees team that has nothing to play for at this point, except, I guess, spoiling their division rivals' hopes of clinching the playoffs tonight. Pitched a complete game shutout, finishes the year with a 15-4 record, a 2.63 ERA, a .98 WHIP, and 222 strikeouts, and 2 complete game shutouts. If he doesn't win the AL Cy Young, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, we'll see on that. Definitely a down year for the Yanks, though. Overall, I don't think you would disagree with that. He was a huge bright spot. Okay, let's get into this thing. Let's just touch on criteria real quick. For these top 5 rankings, we wanted to more so encapsulate roster talent rather than form, I guess. Form obviously plays a part in it, and like whether you're on fire right now plays a part in it, of course. But this list is specifically top 5 rosters in the MLB, regardless of which league, regardless of whether they've clinched in the playoffs. Top 5 rosters in the MLB, and I'll start it off with you. Who did you have at number 5?
Man, this is tough. We had a list of teams, the teams that have clinched. I'm not sure if any more teams clinched tonight. We had the Orioles, the Rays, the Twins, the Braves, the Phillies, the Brewers, the Dodgers, and then we had our probable playoff teams: the Blue Jays, the Astros, the Rangers, the Mariners, the Cubs, the Diamondbacks, and the Marlins. There's so many good teams here. For me, I went with Baltimore at number 5. Still young, but love their young talent. I love Gunnar Henderson. I love Adley Rutschman, one of the better young players in baseball already with what the production that he put up this year. Cedric Mullins as that centerpiece veteran, as the center fielder, good centerpiece, hits home runs, has some pop. They got speed. While I don't love their starting pitching, it's good enough, I think, to win at least a wild card series and or a division series. We'll see what happens when they get to the ALCS, if they get there. But, I mean, you have Kyle Bradish, you have Dean Kramer, you have some other good pitchers that I do like. Kyle Gibson, a guy that they brought in from the Phillies. It's not the best starting pitcher. Not the best of the starting pitching, I don't think, that you're going to see in this year's playoffs, which is why I had to bring them down a little bit. I think other teams in these playoffs have better overall pitching staffs, but I love their lineup. Love a lot of the young pieces in it. I like Jorge Mateo. I mean, they're just past. They have speed offensively. They got the ability to hit the ball the other way. They have some pop. They're young. They're inexperienced, but they know nothing other than to just go out and play ball. And they've hit the best of the best pitching this season, and I love the back end of their bullpen. To me, in the playoffs, it's about speed on the base pass. It's about contact hitting, situational hitting. It's about having enough starting pitching, which I think they have. It might not be enough to ultimately win a World Series, but I think it's good enough to get them to at least an ALCS. And they have a shutdown back of their bullpen, and they have had that for most of this year. They've had Felix Bautista. They've had Castillo. They have a lot of guys that come out, throw 100, can get outs fast when they come out of that back into that bullpen, like their manager. I think they're a pretty complete team, but I think there are other teams that are slightly better and more experienced in other areas. So I put the Baltimore, or I wanted to give them their respect, but I put them at number 5.
Interesting. I had the Tampa Bay Rays at number 5. This list is really difficult just because of how deep the MLB is, but I think for me right now, with how injured that entire Tampa Bay Rays pitching staff is, I know they've been still winning a lot of games, and you got to give them credit on that. But, I mean, I think they've got 3 starting pitchers on the IL, all of them lost to Tommy John. I mean, when you have that, it's hard to really even quantify how big that is for a baseball team. I mean, that's 3 starting pitchers. That's huge. So I don't know. I guess maybe I saw it differently than you did, but I went with the Rays at 5.
Okay. Number 4, it's tough. I had a consensus top 3. Um, there are good teams that could be in better form than these teams. Like my number 3 team really isn't in the best of form as you might expect right now, but they are a complete team. They're just not playing well right now, or at least haven't been playing well lately. You can nitpick things about this roster, but I went the Philadelphia Phillies. They're a team that I think is going to give teams like the Dodgers and the Braves a lot of hell if they match up in the postseason. I like their lineup. I have roster resource up right now. We saw what this lineup did last year, and it's dealt with some injuries over the course of this season. But I think it's relatively healthy now. They just recently clinched postseason berth. Let me see. I need to pull up their lineup. I like their pitching. We saw what it did last year, and their bullpen has gotten better. Obviously, Bryce Harper, coming off the UCL surgery, has learned to play some different positions, including first base, and he's just an absolute fiend in the postseason and has been. He shines on the biggest stage. You have other guys like Brandon Marsh, who can hit the ball the other way. They have some speed on the bases with Gene Segura. They've got, obviously, Trey Turner, who's one of the better players in baseball overall. I like what they have on their pitching staff. As I mentioned, I like what they have in their bullpen. I think they're going to be a team that finds a way to be complete in the postseason like they were last year. I'm still missing some guys in that lineup. I'm just blanking. But I like the Phillies. I think they're a really, really good team that has the star power. They have enough in their bullpen. It's gotten better. I think they added who was it that they added in that bullpen? I have to look. They added someone in that bullpen from this offseason, but love the starters. I like the Phillies. Who'd you have at number 4?
At number 4, I had the Texas Rangers. I think I put a lot of stock into this lineup the Rangers have. I mean, second in the AL in overall runs scored. I mean, they've been tearing it up the entire season. When you're hitting as well as they have, you're not going to be out of any game. I mean, you could be down 6-0 and feel like we can just get all it takes is one pitch and you can get hot. And we've seen it so many times with this team this year. They just, whatever it is when it comes to hitting, whenever they need a big hit, they get it. So whether that translates over to the postseason or not, that's yet to be seen. But I mean, Corey Seager, Trevor Siemian, you add Max Scherzer at the trade deadline. I think that roster is really, really good, man.
Yeah, I think it is too. They didn't make my top 5, but that lineup has all the firepower in the world. A guy like Adolis Garcia is probably not even a guy that a lot of people know right now, but he's been crushing this year. They have some other young guys they've brought up throughout the course of the past couple of years. You have the centerpieces. Marcus Semien, who they brought over the year before last, did not have a great year last year, but has returned to the player that he was in his previous stop in Toronto from 2 years ago. Guy that has some pop, will steal bases, is really solid defensively, just a really good overall all-star caliber player. You pair him with Corey Seager, who's had his fair share of health concerns, but is healthy and is playing good baseball. those two guys can hit the ball the other way. They have postseason experience at other places. You have Max Scherzer. You obviously made the big move for Jacob deGrom, but obviously he has his own fair share of health issues. And for most of the year, they've had a bullpen that has been good. But when you have an offense like that, a lot of the times you don't even really have to rely on your bullpen all that often. They did go out the trade deadline or right before the trade deadline and get a guy like Aroldis Chapman. They added a couple pieces to that bullpen. I think they're a pretty complete team. But the way I viewed it, I just viewed it a little bit differently. But look, I mean, I think in this postseason, outside of maybe one or two teams, depending on who else gets in, it's fairly wide open for anybody. I mean, that World Series trophy is sitting there, and it's going to be up to one of these teams outside of maybe the one that I think of immediately to go out there and get it. So my internet, for whatever reason, just completely shut down on me. But I guess since the connection is still going, we'll keep going with this. As long as the connection is there, we're fine. Yeah. Just can't get to any of my tabs that I had pulled up, which is an issue. Okay. My number 3 team, which is a team that I referenced, but hasn't necessarily been playing well recently when they absolutely need it, because now I don't know what they did tonight. They were playing the Seattle Mariners tonight. Haven't really been checking the scores tonight. But they're really, I mean, this isn't a sentence I thought we would say at the beginning of this year. The Houston Astros are in danger of actually missing the playoffs. They are.
Yeah.
Especially if they lost tonight. Then they would need to go win 2 games at Arizona, a team that's fighting for its playoff lives as well. And they would need, I think, Seattle to lose a game or 2 to get in. What was the result of that game, by the way? I think it just started actually maybe a couple hours ago. Anyway, if the Houston Astros make the playoffs and if they get in, even though they'll be in a little bit different of a situation coming into these playoffs, as they'll be most likely the last wild card team to get in behind Toronto and behind other teams. Although I think the Yankees have actually helped the Astros out by beating Toronto twice the past 2 nights. So who knows where that goes. But if the Astros get in, the bottom line is that's a top 5 complete roster. I mean, they haven't been playing good, but there's a difference between playing good baseball and having a complete team. And I think the Astros have a complete team. Their death lineup, from Altuve to Bregman to Alvarez to Jeremy Pena to Martin Maldonado to Jose Abreu to Kyle Tucker. I mean, it just doesn't get much better than that, top to bottom. Then you have the pitching staff, which I know has been up and down this year, but I give them the benefit of the doubt because of what those guys have done in the postseason, from a guy like Jose Urquidy to Framber Valdez to everyone else that they have, the young guy that they have in Hunter Brown, who's been really good this year. And the bullpen with Presley and all the other arms that they have, Hector Neris, whoever you want to mention. I mean, with a manager like Dusty Baker, who knows the flow of the postseason, who knows the flow of the game, can feel out those sorts of things. I think the Astros, with that lineup, with starting pitching that knows how to pitch in the postseason, and a bullpen that's very solid, maybe not the best in baseball, but very solid at the very least, I view them as a very complete team. They've proven that the past couple of years. Maybe I'm giving them too much of the benefit of the doubt due to what's happened in past years, but I mean, I don't know. They might not even get in, and this could be a moot point, but I think they will find their way in as long as they won tonight.
They're currently up 4-3 on the Mariners midway through the 6th inning.
Ooh, that's an interesting game. That must be a playoff environment in Seattle right now. Okay, who's your number 3?
I think I I agree with you on the Astros point. I think leaving them off my list was probably a mistake, but that's the conversation for another day. My number 3 team, um, I had the
Well, no, I
Baltimore.
don't.
Huh?
Sorry to interrupt you. I don't think there are any wrong answers here. I mean, there are probably some, but it's just the way that you view it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So go ahead and move on with your point.
yeah. I had the Baltimore Orioles at 3. I had them. I actually wrote them down at 2. I actually accidentally flipped my number 2 team with them when I wrote them down earlier, but I had them at 3 for the same reasons you had mentioned earlier. A lot of it is the starting pitching, but I don't know. I think in the postseason, as long as you can manage the first few innings of the game without getting too far down, get yourself too much into a deficit, then I think the Orioles will be just fine because I trust this offense. As long as they're within 2 or 3 runs in the game, I mean, they can flip it. Similar to the Rangers, they have the star power. They have the consistent hitting throughout the lineup as well. So bullpen wise, they're there. Closer wise, you're not going to find a much better guy than Bautista. I mean, I've said it before on this podcast. I'm low key a closet Orioles fan just because of how entertaining to watch they've been. They've like honestly with how much more baseball I've watched this year, the Orioles have really been the team that's gotten me into things when it comes to baseball. So, I mean, I just really love this roster.
Yeah. We had some differences the first 3, but I think we're going to agree on the top 2.
Right.
Can we agree that the Dodgers are second and the Braves are
Yep.
first?
That's how I had it.
Okay.
Uh,
Let's start with the Dodgers. Obviously, not a great situation with Julio Urias. That's unfolded at least a couple weeks ago, as he's now on indefinite leave with his situation. That's not great. He's one of the best postseason starting pitchers of the past couple of years. Not great, but when you think about the Dodgers, you have obviously at the centerpiece of that offense, at its heart and soul, Mookie Betts, still a top tier caliber of baseball player, and Freddie Freeman. You have Justin Turner, who continues to put out good season after good season. Their catcher Will Smith is a guy that I've liked for a long time. You have other pieces there, obviously. They have some young starting pitching, including Dustin May, guys that I really like. And I haven't watched much of the Dodgers because a lot of their games are just later on, and I don't really care to tune in, especially with football going on. But they continue to win at a high level. You still have Clayton Kershaw, who's getting it done at a really high level. And their bullpen has been solid. They're just not quite on the level or as complete as a team like the Atlanta Braves. Do you have any comments on the Dodgers?
I think a lot of it comes down to I just think the experience that they have, you can't replace that. It's similar to the Astros in terms of like when it comes to Freddie Freeman, when it comes to Mookie Betts, you just know at some point they're going to deliver. In the 3 or 4 at bats that they're going to get in the game, they're going to come through for you. So, I mean, having a guy like Freddie Freeman who can turn any at bat into a walk, it feels like. I mean, he's as patient as it gets. He doesn't swing at, you know, he doesn't swing at balls pretty much ever. So this lineup feels like it's unflappable. The pitching has always been great. They're going to be right there.
Yeah, and then there's the Atlanta Braves. I mean, what do we say about this team right now? Well-run organization. They're kind of like the Bucks in a way. Some of these other really well-run organizations, the Kansas City Chiefs, the New England Patriots for a long, long time, just continue to win 100 games season after season after season. They have a streak of winning that division. They're just a dominant team, top to bottom. Love Spencer Strider. Love that rotation. Love their bullpen. Absolutely love their lineup. There's nothing to nitpick here with the Atlanta Braves. And I don't think you can name a better player definitively than Ronald Acuna Jr. going into these playoffs right now.
Yeah, you can't. There's no way. I mean, just his ability to just steal bases in a postseason setting, I think that can't be understated. I mean, he's going to get on base. He's going to give you the home runs, but when he gets a walk, he'll just steal a base and get in running in scoring position. And with how good the lineup is, whenever you have a guy in scoring position, you can just chalk it in as a run at that point.
Yeah. They won again tonight. They beat the Cubs. Obviously, Acuna, the first ever 40-70 season in MLB history. He's going to win NL MVP. You have Matt Olson, who they got in the Freddie Freeman deal with the Dodgers. They get him. He leads the MLB in RBIs and homers, and he's not even Ronald Acuna Jr. You still have Ozzie Albies, who's an all-star level caliber second baseman. You have one of the more underrated players in all of baseball, Austin Riley, at third base. So you look at that infield, it's just ridiculous. And then you still, I guess if you were going to nitpick something about this Braves team, is that I don't love Marcell Ozuna at this stage in his career at the DH spot. But like everything else about this lineup, love Harris, the young stud, love everyone top to bottom in this lineup. They do everything. They hit for power. They hit the other way. They steal bases. They have speed. They can go first to third, second to home, first to home. They can make life difficult on opposing pitchers by being patient, waiting their turn, controlling the strike zone. They can pitch. Spencer Strider was a guy that pretty much all season long has been up for one of the better pitchers in baseball, potentially NL Cy Young candidate. Fried, I think. Max Fried is another really nice pitcher. They have the experienced guy that they brought over from Tampa Bay, Charlie Morton, who's still really good. And in that bullpen, man, they just have a really complete team. And it's hard to argue. I mean, what are they at this point? How many wins do they actually have? Do you have the standings in front of you?
Let's see here. They have
like
102 wins.
102 wins right now, and we've got 4 or 5 games left. So they've already clinched home field through the NL playoffs. And if they go on to win the World Series, this could be considered one of the better teams of the modern era of baseball. Just dominant start to finish. And considering what they did, what was at the time considered to be a somewhat controversial decision to not pay Freddie Freeman, who had been the cornerstone piece of that franchise for a long, long time, to go get Matt Olson. Don't know why I'm saying Max Olson. I think it's because there's a writer for The Athletic whose name is Max Olson. But, it's incredible what they've done. They're just a well-run organization, and right now, they would be my pick to win the World Series. I know the best team doesn't always win, but I think they are at least my pick to get out of the National League.
Yeah. The playoffs can be really, really weird. And I think if we were to see anyone upset the Dodgers, or if we were to see anyone upset the Braves in the NL, I would probably have to say the Phillies, just because of, I mean, their ability explosively just to round off home runs one after another. But there's not a team that I can see. I mean, taking them in less than 7 games, if put it that way.
Yeah, I just nitpicking Marcell Ozuna. He actually hit the game-tying home run in tonight's game. So before the Braves walked it off, so he's still a guy that can run into one every now and then. And if he gets a fastball over the middle of the plate, he's going to take it out.
Yeah.
That's what you want out of your DH. You want a guy that can drive in runs, hit for a little bit of power, doesn't necessarily have to be the fastest guy in the world, a guy that can get on base at a high rate. That's another thing that the Braves do, is they get on base, and it sets up opportunities for guys at the bottom of that lineup. And flipping over the lineup, going from the 9th to the 1st hitter in the order, you get guys on base in that 7th, 8th, and 9th spots, and it sets up Acuna. It sets up Albies. It sets up Olsen. It sets up all your elite hitters to drive in runs. And in order to score runs in baseball, you have to have guys on base, and you have to have guys capable of driving them in on a consistent basis. Guys that can hit any kind of pitching, left-handed, right-handed. They've got switch hitters in their lineup, guys that can hit right and left-handed. They've got so much versatility. They've got great pitching, enough pitching to win a World Series, both in their bullpen and in their starting rotation. And look, in the postseason, some of those guys that they have in their rotation will be moved to the bullpen at certain points in the postseason. You don't need all your starters all the time in the postseason. And then, in a 5-game series, you're probably only going to 3 guys. You can move a couple of those starters to your bullpen to even fortify that group. So, and with Snitker, man, great manager, knows what he's doing, well-run team, love the GM. I could heap praise on the Braves all day long for like an entire podcast. So I think that's all that needs to be said for right now.
Yeah. All right. We'll go ahead and wrap this up. Yeah. Any parting shots?
I don't know. Big weekend, I guess you could say. It's as I mentioned at the beginning, I mean, big college football weekend. It's not as big as last week, but still really solid weekend.
Yeah.
NFL, of course, I'll be at a game on Sunday. So the next time we record together, at least, can talk about that. We'll be live for our NFL recap Sunday night, and if not Sunday night, Monday evening. And then from now on, we're going to be tweeting out before we go live so that you guys know. But just know that the one live episode that will stay constant throughout the course of football season will be those NFL recaps. Those will always be live shows. And then deep in the heart of Longhorn sports will continue throughout Longhorn football season, Longhorn basketball season, Longhorn baseball season. I've just moved it to twice a week instead of declaring days that I'll be going live. It's hard to do that with my work schedule and everything else that goes on in my life. But it will be twice a week. Right. It will just vary depending on what I have going on at the time. Right. And Imy will be back on deep in the heart of Longhorn sports next week, as next week's a big week. It's Red River.
Yep.
So that'll be fun. And then we'll be talking about baseball playoffs next week. We'll be talking about wild card. We'll be talking about all that sort of
Ryder
stuff.
Cup too.
Ryder Cup reactions, all of that.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say before we sign off is it's going to be a big weekend for my Cowboys. We're playing the Patriots, and we could easily go from being 2-0 and feeling invincible to being 2-2 and just questioning everything. I'm a little bit afraid. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, I think most teams get uneasy when you go up against Bill Belichick and that defense. Yeah. But I totally get that. It's not necessarily we'll talk about that later on our NFL recap. So just like, have a good night. Thank you to our one guest who is tuning in. We greatly appreciate that. I'm going to try to get deep in the heart of Longhorn Sports or Dit Hole recorded sometime on Friday, but I can't guarantee that. So if not, we'll be back next week. Hopefully the Horns take care of business this weekend. It's not a game that should be taken lightly at all, going up against Kansas.
Yep.
But yeah, like and subscribe to our channel. And just like the Damian Lillard era in Portland, we are going.